I love Silksong bosses. I love them in the same way a mother loves her 46 children. And what better way to display that love than by ranking each of them to determine their inherent value and whether or not they deserve to exist. But don't worry, I'm not just going to rank them using my own subjective feelings. Instead, I'll be using cold, hard data. A few months ago, I shared a poll asking respondents to score every Silksong boss from 1 to 5. 16,743 of you responded to that poll, and we can now use that data to objectively rank every boss in the game. So if you disagree with any of the placements on this list, you only have yourself to blame. Now, I did shave off a few hundred submissions. Basically, if a player marked a mandatory boss fight as did not encounter, I discarded their submission. That includes Moss Mother, Bell Beast, Widow, either Last Judge or Phantom, Cogwork Dancers, TROBBBBIOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOO fourth chorus, or Sister Splinter, or Pablo. Well, the fourth chorus fight can actually be skipped by doing some tricky off-camera movement. Since the fight doesn't lock you in the room, Sister Splinter can be skipped by pogoing off a fascia in one of the rooms leading up to the encounter, and Pablo isn't actually a boss in Hollow Knight Silksong. I know most players won't be doing this stuff on their first playthroughs, but these bosses are technically skippable, so I'm just going to count them as optional bosses. After these cuts, we're left with 16,361 submissions. And keep in mind, some bosses have way less total scores, so some scores might be a little skewed. But out of all 46 bosses, only 5 had a did not encounter rate over 10%, so it's probably close enough. Look, I'm not a statistician. All the data from the poll is in the description if you want to look at it yourself, you nerd. For each boss, I'll show off their average score, their median score, and their mode score, as well as how many respondents did not fight a boss. Finally, I calculate each boss's consensus ranking. Basically, the higher their consensus ranking, the more people agreed on what their score should be. I also defeated all the bosses hitless, to make sure I knew the fights intimately, and after dying to Tormented TROBBBBIOOOOOOOOO 140 times, I'd say I know him pretty intimately now, and I would have it any other way. Some of you might be wondering how I can truly call this ranking objective when the objective metric I'm using is based on people's subjective answers. And that's a good question. At the bottom of the list is Plasmified Zango, the corpse of Alchemist Xolotl's assistant, reanimated by lifeblood. This is the only boss on the list with a median score of 1. That means over half of all respondents who fought this boss rated him a 1 out of 5. This boss is only accessible in Act 3, tucked away in the far corner of the Wormways, making him the 5th least encountered boss in the game, with a did not fight rate of about 16%. But you didn't miss out on much if you never fought this guy. Zango's primary attack is to fire a barrage of lifeblood masses into the air, with the amount increasing as he gets closer to dying. Zango also has a scuttle move that punishes standing too close between attacks. Not much to write home about. Zango's lore is somewhat interesting, giving us a glimpse into how lifeblood acts like a parasite on its hosts. This video is releasing before Silksong's first content pack, Sea of Sorrow, which many expect will be related to lifeblood in some way. But as of right now, Plasmified Zango is the only lifeblood related boss we've ever seen. And for lifeblood being so mysterious for so long, with hints at its more sinister and powerful nature, this being our first boss connected to this stuff is a bit lame. Zango's most unique ability is that he heals himself over the course of the fight. There's only one other boss like this in the entire game, and, well, she's a bit higher on the list. It's no surprise to see Zango this far down. I completely agree with the community here. I think Team Cherry even had their own suspicions, trying to hide him away where people wouldn't find him. Next up is Pale Stag, coming in at number 45. This boss is found in Lost Verdania, a location only accessible in Silksong's 3rd act. Pale Stag is the 6th least encountered boss fight with a did not fight rate of around 9%. But Pale Stag still managed to be found by about 7% more people than Plasmified Zango. Pale Stag's strategy is to simply teleport around this small room and spawn blades that deal double damage to Hornet. Feels like a bit of a non sequitur, but okay. Pale Stag is another simple boss hidden deep in the game, and will likely be one of the last bosses players will face. And I think that really makes them suffer, because I don't think Pale Stag is that awful of a boss fight. Like, there's an interesting idea here. But in a game with lots of good bosses, being just an okay boss is a death sentence. So while I do think Pale Stag is quite a bit better than Zango, they're still pretty low tier for me. But if this list were ranking cute little weirdos, they just might be number 1 in my heart. The next lowest enemy on the list is Broodmother, at number 44, the matriarch of the Citadel's slab prison complex. Broodmother can only be found in Act 2 onward, by accepting the Wailing Mother wish. Less than 5% of players missed her, so it's not like Team Cherry hid all their stinker bosses in the endgame portions of Silksong. Broodmother's moveset is unsurprisingly straightforward. None of her attacks are all that complicated, with the challenge mainly coming from the small arena size and her somewhat erratic movements. But I'm afraid to report that the ranking of 44 is far too low for this boss. I love Broodmother, and I think the community is gravely mistaken on the merits of this encounter. I will admit, part of my fondness for her comes from her body slam attack, which reminded me of Gruzmother's stupid body slam move from Hollow Knight. And in my old age, I become quite a sucker for Hollow Knight nostalgia. Hollow Knight really was such a good game. But that's not the only reason I like Broodmother. Let's talk about a controversial staple of Hollow Knight boss encounters, minion spawns. Unlike most other attacks, which have clear duration periods that cannot overlap with one another, minion spawns have the potential to entirely disrupt the flow of a boss fight. Out of all the minion spawning bosses across both Hollow Knight titles, the Collector probably has the best lore explanation, but within the realm of Silksong, I'd call Broodmother the undisputed champion of this mechanic. She literally gives birth to her minions during the fight. I love this. Such an immaculate display of the beauty of life and the inevitability of death, summed up in the mere blink of an eye. Silksong has a lot of great commentaries about life in this way. Top that off with how her other attacks are evolutions of the Wardenfly attacks we've already seen at this point, and I'd say Broodmother is an adequately realized boss, deserving of a bit more respect from the community. Is she a good fight? Well, let's not go too far, but no way she's the third worst boss fight in the entire game. The infamous Savage Beastfly 2 claims the pre-anti-penultimate number 43 for the worst boss in Silksong. However, Beastfly 2 also scores 44 on the consensus ranking, meaning players were quite split on where to rank this encounter. When Silksong first released, the Savage Beastfly became a lightning rod for those complaining about Silksong's unfair difficulty. There's even a subreddit called r/fucksavagebeastfly. You know you fucked up when Redditors are mad at you. They're like the most chill people on the planet. While neither fight proved popular on this list, the rematch in Farfields proved the most least popular of the two. It won't take long at all to reach Savage Beastfly 1, so let's hold off on discussing this fella too much. But just know that the changes Savage Beastfly 2 brings to the table are a janky arena that even the Beastfly itself can get confused by, and the addition of termites that can shoot lingering fireballs. It's kinda cool to see the fourth chorus arena get recontextualized like this, but I guess a lot of players didn't find these changes too inspiring. At number 42 on the list, we have the vyrm, a strange boss hidden away at the top of the Sands of Karak. vyrm is the first boss on this list to have a mode of 2 instead of 1, which means that more people opted to give this thing a 2 instead of a 1. Good job, vyrm. I want to like vyrm. This little electric anemone has some of the most stylish attacks in the game, but this boss suffers from being too simple for how late you're most likely to encounter it. If you could find this thing around the same time as the somewhat nearby great conch flies, I wonder if it would score a little higher. But as is, this boss doesn't leave much of an impression. To quote what I wrote in this script I'm reading right now, too little, too late. Not far off from their friend in the Farfields, the Savage Beastfly in the Chapel of the Beast ekes out a slightly higher position at number 41. Much like its kin in the Farfields, This boss proved controversial with players, with a consensus ranking of 43. What makes Savage Beastfly such a controversial boss? Honestly, I think the main reason is that you can wander into this fight fairly underpowered, making it a wall for some players. This was the first boss I struggled with on my initial playthrough, so I certainly understand that. In terms of design, Savage Beastfly can be tricky due to its somewhat unpredictable air movement, an issue that plagues many of Silksong's flying enemies. Another potential reason is the fact that it can spawn vicious Caronids, which are not an easy mob to deal with at all. When looking at Silksong's bosses in totality, Savage Beastfly isn't that difficult, but as it stands in Act 1, the quality of the boss pales in comparison to fights like Lace, Fourth Chorus, and even Moorwing. So putting aside that this boss became the poster child for Silksong's difficulty, it's not surprising seeing the Savage Beastfly has landed so low on this list. Charging into the list at number 40 is the Skull Tyrant, the Marrow's largest predator and angriest boy. It seems respondents were fairly confident in ranking this boss, with almost half of all respondents giving Skull Tyrant a 2 out of 5. Personally, I think the Skull Tyrant is a great addition to Silksong's boss roster. He has good telegraphs, but the fight still feels intense due to his massive size. I also think the Skull Tyrant has the best quest of any boss in the game. The wishes in Silksong are a mixed bag for me. A lot of them feel uninspired and lacking creativity. Relevant to this video, I think a lot of the boss-related wishes feel this way as well. We've discussed two of these bosses already, Broodmother and Savage Beastfly 2. For whatever reason, you won't be able to find Broodmother when first exploring the slab. Her appearance is locked behind a wish in Songclave. Apparently, they find the Broodmother's wailing annoying, but Songclave is all the way on the other side of the Citadel. The wish itself feels entirely disconnected from the boss encounter. The wish that triggers the Savage Beastfly in the Farfields is found in Bellheart, and while it makes a bit more sense that pilgrims would want this dangerous, raging beast slain, it still feels somewhat arbitrary. The Terrible Tyrant wish is connected to the Skull Tyrant fight, although you can still find him without accepting the wish, unlike every other Grand Hunt wish in the game. And this wish works on so many levels. First of all, the Skull Tyrant is actually in roughly the same region as Bone Bottom, where the wish is found. But what really makes the Terrible Tyrant wish special is how it changes the world. Because once Hornet completes the wish, there's a chance for a second Skull Tyrant to attack her in Bone Bottom, destroying the bench and possibly killing Pilby the Pilgrim, leading to a funeral procession that is among the greatest sequences in all of media. I just wish real funerals were this funny. It's insane that out of all the bosses in Silksong, this glorified Goomba gets the best wish in the entire game. All that said, this boss is really easy. His attack telegraphs are almost as long as Silksong's entire development cycle, on top of being trivial to dodge. His arena is also a bit awkward, but we'll talk about these types of arenas later in the video. As much as I love the Terrible Tyrant wish, I do think this ranking is reasonable. Conjured in at number 39, it's the Summoned Savior. This boss takes the cake for the least fought boss in the entire game, with 69% of players having never fought it. That makes sense, considering this boss is locked behind Steel Soul mode. The Summoned Savior has some cool lore, giving us a glimpse into the Steel Society and the art of void summoning. But it feels like all this is just teasing us for later content packs. I want to fight Steel Assassin Sharp already, not this skid mark. The Summoned Savior fight itself is ass. It uses the same void attacks seen in the void-threaded enemies of Act 3, which are fine enough to deal with. I guess Team Cherry realized this made the boss too easy, because it also has a dash attack that comes out almost instantly, making it near impossible to dodge. On top of that, the boss doesn't give Silk, so there's no conventional healing or Silk skill usage in this fight. Your best bet is to spam tools to defeat it. Alternatively, the dash attack can't go straight up, so you could try pogoing it. But I don't think this method is entirely foolproof, and you probably want a foolproof method for tackling this enemy, considering this is Steel Soul mode we're talking about. Lore-wise, it's a pretty cool boss, but if you didn't fight it, you didn't miss out on much. It barely qualifies as a boss. At number 38, it's Moss Mother. It seems respondents were torn on giving this boss a 2 or a 3. Moss Mother's big problem is that she's too easy, but that's kinda the point. Moss Mother is a tutorial boss. She's supposed to be easy. If I go to the soggy burger store and order a burger, can I really complain when it's soggy? At number 37, it's 2 Moss Mothers. Overlapping the same boss certainly makes the fight more difficult, but I'm not sure how much more interesting it is. It seems these 2 boss fights were ranked almost identically on the poll, so I don't think the change really made an impact on people. Maybe because it's fairly easy to just kill the first Moss Mother before the second one even shows up. I'd honestly put this fight below the original fight. It just seems less structurally sound from a design point of view. I can handle 1 soggy burger, but 2? That's where I draw the line. That's 10 bosses down so far. I'd say they mostly fall into 2 categories. Bosses that feel too simple, like Moss Mother, Skull Tyrant, vyrm, and Pale Stag, and bosses that are frustrating, like Broodmother and Savage Beastfly 2. Let's see if the next entry on our list can avoid these pitfalls. At number 36, it's... the Unraveled. This boss had a did not fight rate of about 8%, and I wish I was one of them. The White Ward has been praised by many for its creepy and oppressive atmosphere, so it's a shame the Unraveled doesn't seem to have hit the mark for a lot of players. The single most frustrating part about this fight is the Unraveled's hitbox. It is so easy to accidentally walk into this boss and take damage. If we turn on hitboxes, we can see that the Unraveled's is fairly close to what the sprite for his cloak is. The problem is that it tapers down, creating this slope shape. This results in the hitboxes for this fight feeling janky. The rest of the boss fight isn't fun either. It spends a lot of time hiding, leading to extended periods of downtime. There are multiple enemy waves that interrupt the fight, and maybe I just suck, but this corpse barrage attack is so hard to dodge. I found myself just hiding above the Unraveled any time it used the attack. I wouldn't say the Unraveled is an awful fight, and I can understand why some people like it, but I don't think it plays into what makes boss fights in Silksong so strong. Blazing bright at number 35 is Father of the Flame, another controversial boss. Some people hate it, some people like it, but it seems no one really loves it. This is probably the most gimmicky boss in the game. You just have to keep pogoing its weak points while dodging flaming wisp enemies. The second phase changes things up a little, but this boss doesn't offer much outside of providing a slightly novel experience. The general consensus regarding Silksong's lore is that things are explained more clearly versus Hollow Knight. I tend to agree with that, but the Wisp Thicket and the burning bugs are one of the few aspects of Silksong's story that get almost no explanation. And while that might score Father of the Flame some brownie points, it isn't enough to get this boss any higher on this list. When ranking a boss, should you consider their runback and pre-fight gauntlet as well? When I constructed this poll, I intentionally left the questions open-ended to allow for people to interpret the quality of the boss however they wanted. At number 34, Grohl the Great proved the most controversial entry on this list, sporting the lowest consensus ranking out of any boss in the game. Grohl is the first entry to receive over 5% 5 out of 5 ratings, but they also got over 25% 1 out of 5s. Judging Grohl by themselves, they're not a particularly complicated boss. Their moveset is simple, with their most threatening move being when they spit bouncing slime balls at you. What makes Grohl so noteworthy is the fact that they're hidden behind an enemy gauntlet that itself is located quite a few rooms away from the nearest bench, which itself is hidden away behind a breakable wall, and the next nearest bench is all the way on the other side of Biowater, a region of Farloom filled with maggot-infested muck water. Because of this, Grohl's become an infamous boss in Silksong's roster. I've seen some people argue that games shouldn't have runbacks at all in this day and age. But the reality is, Grohl's runback is a huge part of their identity, and I do think Grohl is better because of it. If Team Cherry put a bench right outside Bilehaven, that would completely throw off the vibe of this encounter. Of course, not all runbacks are created equal, and there is one runback in Silksong that I do think is bad. But personally, I think Grohl, and Biowater in general, serve as a great challenge for players hoping to reach Act 3. If we're lucky, Team Cherry will add at least 3 more swamps to the game. Gur the Outcast sneaks his way to number 33 on the list. It seems respondents confidently placed him somewhere between 2 and 3. Gur is unique among Silksong bosses in that he actually had a slight update to his moveset a few months after Silksong's release. So it's hard to say if people rating Gur in this poll were going off the old version of the fight or the new version. While the update did improve the fight overall, the core premise remains the same. Gur jumps all over the place and spams the screen with a barrage of tools. Luckily, the traps Gur throws don't immediately trigger, giving Hornet time to reposition. But if you're not careful, you can get caught out by the sea of shit on screen. I think Gur is a frantic and fun boss, but somewhat awkward in his execution. He's also another weird wish boss. This random character Gilly says Gur stole her doll. Who the fuck is Gilly? I've never even heard of this character. If she's in the game, she must be insanely well hidden. Anyway, we do all this wish stuff without even interacting with this supposed Gilly character. Stuff like this hurts the overall effect I think wishes were supposed to have. But this video isn't about my gripes with wishes, as much as I keep wishing that were the case. Getting back to Gur, I like him. From here on out, I'd say most of these bosses universally fall into the good category, and we aren't even in the top 30 yet. Cooking up a horrendous meal that will make you vomit your brains out and probably poop your pants at number 32 is disgraced Chef Lugoli. It seems there weren't enough gigantic Fanny fans out there to push this boss any higher on the list, and that's honestly a shame. A lot of aspects of Silksong feel like fleshed out versions of ideas that first appeared in Hollow Knight. Lugoli falls into that camp, further exploring the concept of civilized bugs eating one another, first introduced in the universally beloved character Poggy Thorax. Lugoli was exiled from the Citadel for culinary crimes, possibly referring to the pickled corpses they keep in their lair. Maybe. The game doesn't confirm either way. Lugoli's disgusting and macabre lore creates a humorous juxtaposition with their cartoonish moveset, attacking Hornet with their monstrous behind and majestically diving directly into maggot-infested muck water. However, Lugoli suffers a bit from something a fair number of bosses suffer from in Silksong. I think it's time we discuss some of the jank surrounding flying bosses. The logic bosses use to move through the air in Silksong can be somewhat difficult to gauge as a player. Previously discussed examples of this are Savage Beastfly and Broodmother. I personally think disgraced Chef Lugoli suffers the most from some whack aerial movement. 2 of their attacks in particular bother me. When disgraced Chef Lugoli wants to use this ground pound move on Hornet, they'll float around awkwardly until they are close, then suddenly snap themselves above Hornet so she'll be in range of the attack. This happens very suddenly and unnaturally, and when I was fighting them, I could usually tell when they were trying to do this, making the fight feel less like a real battle and more like a test in how I can manipulate the game's AI. The other attack is when Lugoli dives into the water. They fly across the screen like a heat-seeking missile when performing this attack, and it just looks weird. I don't think this ruins the fight, but it does add a bit of fuzziness to everything that doesn't quite feel right in a game like Silksong. Edging from their perch at number 31 on the list, it's Watcher at the Edge. If we exclude the Steel Soul exclusive boss, Summoned Savior, and the 2 Missile Ball bosses exclusive to Act 2, Watcher was the most missed boss in the game, with 19% of responders reporting they did not fight them. And that makes sense when we see where Watcher is hidden. You have to Silksoar in this specific section of the Sands of Karak to reach their arena. I have no idea how anyone is supposed to find this on their own. I know New gives you a hint, but it's not a good one. Watcher at the Edge is basically a souped up version of a Karaka enemy found in the Coral Tower. While there isn't much complexity to be found here, the fight itself is hype. Fighting a solitary guardian with a massive sword at the edge of the world will always be cool. Granted, getting killed by Hornet after standing around for potentially hundreds of years is kinda lame, but whatever. Burrowing their way to number 30, it's the Great Conchflies. Why are all the so-called great bosses so low on this list? The Great Conchflies are another simple yet solid fight. They are reminiscent of the Oblobbles fight from Hollow Knight, a pair of beasts using an identical moveset to surround the player with a barrage of attacks. However, the Great Conchflies fight has a faster pace, and when the first mate dies, her partner flees, promising to get their revenge on Hornet. This fight, while fairly straightforward, is an engaging moment of gameplay in a region of Farloom that isn't exactly the most fun to traverse. Trust me, I would rather beat up these two than deal with the smaller conches in the blasted steppes that love to fly just out of reach while spamming those stupid ricocheting conch cutters. I really hope William got fired for that. Less of a boss fight and more of a friendly sparring match, Garmin and Zaza secure spot number 29 on the list. Garmin and Zaza are one of the 2 missable fights exclusive to Silksong's second act. 38% of respondents did not encounter this fight, making them the most missed fight after Summoned Savior. I also missed this encounter on my first playthrough, and looking at the requirements for it, I'm not that surprised. Once you unlock the path above the Whispering Vault, the 2 will appear there offering to battle Hornet. However, once Hornet gets the threefold melody and completes the Fine Pin's wish, Garmin and Zaza will move to Songclave for the rest of the act and no longer offer to duel. It feels so random to me why this happens, but I guess Team Cherry wants the characters' movements around Farloom to feel somewhat organic. But let's shift our attention to the actual fight itself. It's piss easy. It might even be easier than Moss Mother. It's kind of insulting. This fight is locked behind fights like Widow and Last Judge. Is this really the best this guy can muster? That said, I can't stay mad at Garmin. That would be like getting mad at a slug. Well, he's not an actual slug, but you know what I mean. It looks like spot 29 wasn't enough for him, because Garmin is also here to claim spot 28 on the list, this time as Lost Garmin. The fact that Lost Garmin appears right next to Garmin and Zaza on this list implies to me that these bosses aren't really being ranked for their design, but more so for who they are. These 2 fights also had low consensus rankings, implying people are split on if they even like Garmin as a character. I mean, I like Garmin, but he's no Hornet Pilgrim, that's for sure. Lost Garmin is the gut punch Team Cherry has queued up for any players daring to journey through Silksong's third act. In a sense, he is this game's Mila, and while I think the tragedy of Mila's fate is a bit more effective with how understated it is, Lost Garmin certainly hits in its own way, and it certainly works well as a wish. When you see Zaza all alone in the blasted steppes, you know immediately what has happened, and the trek over to the Lost Garmin arena just adds to that sense of foreboding. This is more of a story boss than anything. He has the typical void-threaded attacks the player has seen all throughout Act 3, with a couple of lance swings thrown in for good measure. Not a hard fight, but you can't just turn your brain off either. Swooping in at number 27 is Moorwing, the flying beast that stalks the fields of Greymoor. Despite all the build-up to this boss while traversing Greymoor for the first time, it doesn't seem like Moorwing made the strongest impression with players. In the earliest Silksong patches, Team Cherry lowered the difficulty in a few places, with Moorwing being one of the bosses nerfed. But despite that, they still offer a fair challenge to players attempting to reach Bellheart for the first time. The Moorwing's attacks are all solid, and finding ways to sneak in hits makes the boss engaging. Overall, an enjoyable fight. Next. Back for round 2 is Raging Conchfly, snagging number 26 on the list, putting them 4 spots ahead of the Great Conchfly's fight. While their attacks remain largely the same, Raging Conchfly raises the difficulty with a smaller arena and a litter of baby conches to help them reap their bloodthirsty revenge. But little do they know, Hornet is more bloodthirsty. Also, what better use for your babies than to use them as projectiles against your foes? Bosses like Raging Conchfly and Broodmother really do keep it real. While it is tougher than the Great Conchfly's fight, this rematch isn't too challenging. The only move I really struggled with was when they would spit out one of those stupid conch cutters that bounces all over the room. However, I realized that you can just Threadstorm in this idiot's face to completely neutralize this attack. If you do that, Raging Conchfly becomes a total pushover. But the fast pace still makes for an exhilarating match nevertheless. Belleater gobbles up number 25 on the list. It seems these bosses in the middle of the pack don't have a ton of consensus around them, so they end up settling around 3 out of 5, or the average score. Belleater is one of the first big twists of Act 3, blocking off access to our beloved Bell Beast. Everything surrounding this boss's presentation is amazing, from when it first bursts out of the ground of the Bell Station, to when it gets completely obliterated by the Bell Beast. It's such a great kickoff to Silksong's endgame. As for the fight itself, well, one of this boss's attacks involves firing explosive balls from its butthole, so naturally this boss is an automatic S tier. The fact that it's so low on this list is actually insulting. Like, genuinely, what are you idiots thinking? People are going to start thinking that Silksong fans are morons. Drifting through the sky at number 24 is Pinstress. Interestingly enough, Pinstress ratings are almost identical to Bell Eaters and Raging Conchflies, but if I were ranking these bosses, I'd probably put Pinstress below the other two. The Pinstress fight is weird. She teaches Hornet the Needle Strike, so you'd think her attacks would mostly focus on melee attacks, but instead, she spends most of the fight flapping around in the air throwing shit at her opponent. Out of all the bosses in the game, she's the most annoying in terms of constantly remaining out of reach to hit. The arena itself is small and open, which means both you and Pinstress can end up falling out of it. All these details lead to the fight feeling more frustrating than fun. One thing I do like about the fight is that Pinstress herself is very goofy. The way her garment allows her to float around, and the way she moves while on the ground make her stand out as a unique fighter in the series. I guess being the only Pinstress left has made her a little bit kooky. This boss is a bit of a mixed bag for me, but I'm glad we got some kind of fight with her, even if it wasn't quite what I would have expected. And you know, I think it's good that so many of the bosses behave so differently in this game, even if they don't always work. And with that, we've made it through the bottom half of Silksong's roster. Right now, we're still in the chunk of bosses I'd consider good, but not great. However, it shouldn't take much longer to reach Silksong's truly amazing fights. Kicking off the top half of the boss roster is Sister Splinter, scooping up number 23. Sister was able to more consistently receive a ranking of 3 from respondents, giving her just enough gas to reach the top half of the list. Another early game boss that got hit with nerfs around the game's launch, Sister Splinter's moveset involves swinging at the ground with her claw, spawning thorn walls and stickbugged minions, and a stagger that has probably hit more players than some of her other moves. I like the fight, and she has an undeniably creepy atmosphere. It reminds me a bit of No Eyes, although a little more frantic. One unique positive about the fight is the reward you get for beating her, the Cling Grip. Sister Splinter is the only boss with a movement upgrade directly after their fight. Technically you can skip her using some pogo chicanery, but still, for a game that often struggles to give quote, meaningful rewards for its boss fights, Sister Splinter is one of the few standouts in this regard. Pulling into the Bellway at number 22 is Bell Beast. Bell Beast is the only boss to receive a majority of 3 out of 5 scores, with 54% ranking them as such. Their consensus ranking is also the highest we've seen yet, in 8th place. Bell Beast might be the quintessential 3 out of 5 boss fight in Silksong. Bell Beast feels like a fully realized version of the massive Moss Charger fight from Hollow Knight, strictly better in pretty much every way. They're on the easy side, but for the second boss of the game, I think they present a good challenge. The Bell Beast fight is well designed, and serves as a great introduction to both Hornet's fast travel companion and the wider world of Farloom. Number 21 on the list are 4 brothers Cygnus and Gron, the elder overseers of the Deep Docks. Despite being called 4 brothers, it seems many respondents viewed them as more of a 3. There are 2 types of pair boss fights in Silksong. You have scripted ones like Cogwork Dancers and Great Conchflies, where the enemy's attacks are synchronized with one another, and you have the ones where the bosses attack separately, without trying to sync up their attacks. We see this with Moss Mother 2 and 4 brothers Cygnus and Gron. Any fight like this can lead to the awkward overlapping of attacks, but the 4 brothers' simplicity in their movesets help mitigate this issue. Cygnus focuses on grounded attacks, with a particularly fast melee attack which makes him hard to pummel, and Gron uses aerial throws and dives with slow, obvious telegraphs. If you can get the 2 put into a corner, you can handle them without much trouble. Positioning is paramount in this fight, and I think it actually works quite well overall. Nihilith has planted herself down at number 20 on the list. Her consensus ranking is quite low at 40 out of 46, but her average score of 3.34 actually puts her above the overall average boss score of 3.24. Nihilith is the first of the Act 3 Old Hearts bosses to make this list, and there's no denying that she's a bit of a gimmick boss, taking away the player's floor privileges for over half the fight. This dynamic forces the player to commit to either being close to Nihilith or keeping their distance at any given time. This slows down the fight in a more interesting way, as the player has to reevaluate where their attack opportunities are. This fight also forces the player to use the claw line more, which is always a good thing in my opinion. The Crawfather has been summoned to number 19 on the list. Almost 9% of respondents did not fight the Crawfather, and that is truly a shame. The Crawfather, and the Court of Craws overall, are hands down the silliest fight in all of Silksong. The fact that the Craws have an entire judicial system through which they judge the bugs of Silksong, and the fact that they seem the most knowledgeable on Hornet's actions out of almost any organized body in the entire kingdom, and the fact that his name is Crawfather, make this boss an all-timer. I don't even care that he spawns these annoying ass craws that always fly just out of striking distance. In fact, the minion spawns in this fight feel decently thought out. The Crawfather's attacks are slow and simple, making it easier to avoid getting overwhelmed. Sorry, but I'm going to get political for a second. I'm going to ruffle some feathers here, so if you have any young children present, please hide them in the closet now. I am against capital punishment, but if a judge is going to sentence you to death, you should at least get a chance to fight your way out of it. Look, Farloom has its problems, but I think this aspect of their society ought to be studied for its potential applications here in the real world. Claiming number 18 on the list is Crust King Khan, the former ruler of Karak. Khan is the first boss on our list to receive both a median and mode score of 4. One big difference between bosses in Silksong versus bosses in Hollow Knight is the use of pre-boss fight minions. In all of Hollow Knight, if we ignore the Coliseum bosses, there's only one boss with an enemy gauntlet before their encounter, and that's Traitor Lord, with a total of 4 Mantis Traitors. Silksong has 6 bosses with pre-fight enemy gauntlets. The Unraveled has 3 enemies before their fight, Carmelita has 7, the Crawfather has 10, and both Grohl and Broodmother have 12. But Crust King Khan takes the crown in that regard. Not only do you have to fight 71 enemies across 3 different gauntlets to even reach the top floor of the Coral Tower, you also have to defeat 18 enemies every time you want to challenge Crust King Khan. Despite all this buildup, the Crust King Khan fight itself is nothing too challenging. Bro just points and Coral grows at you. While not difficult, the fight is still a lot of fun, especially when Khan starts speeding up his attacks. It feels more like a victory lap for completing the rest of the tower than a real boss fight. That said, it is a bit sad to see 2 of the 4 Old Heart boss fights ranked this low on the list. I've heard that Khan used to be a lot harder, but Team Cherry decided to tone him down before the game released. I do wonder if a much harder Khan fight would raise his ranking at all, because right now, he does feel a bit like a pushover. I mean, he's no Garment and Zaza, but given his placement as a late game boss in Act 3, he's surrounded by much more challenging fights. Navigating her way to number 17 on the list is Chakra, warrior, cartographer, and Hornet's friend. Chakra is the other missable Act 2 boss fight, although I think she's a tiny bit easier to find than Garment and Zaza, with only 34% of respondents missing her, as opposed to Garment and Zaza's 38%. While Chakra's fight might be simple like Garment and Zaza's, she is still much more challenging. Chakra keeps teleporting all over the place, throwing these damn rings at me. This boss also highlights a problem that plagues a few of Silksong's boss fights: the wide arenas. Bosses like Chakra, Moorwing, and Shrine Guardian Seth take place in wide rooms for both the player and the boss to move around in. The problem is this can result in attack telegraphs happening off-screen. For example, Chakra likes to spawn on the edge of the screen, where you can clearly see her. But if you're walking while it happens, she can end up appearing off-screen, telegraphing her attack while you're none the wiser. This problem can be mitigated by avoiding moving around while in neutral, but that means you have to awkwardly stand still, where your positioning becomes less about avoiding or punishing the boss, and more about managing your own screen. Hornet is so agile, it makes sense to want to give her space to move around in, and I don't think this boss fight suffers too much from this quirk. but it's an aspect of chakra and other fights that can lead to player frustration. I don't think this is the best version of a chakra fight, but it works for what it is. Chakra is easily one of the best NPCs in the game, and I'm glad Team Cherry was able to sneak in a fight with her, even if it is on the simpler side. Fourth Chorus takes spot 16 on the list. With Fourth Chorus, I think we've reached the upper echelon of Silksong bosses. These bosses all have fairly high scores and generally decent consensus rankings. We've entered great boss territory here, and we've still got a third of the bosses left to go. The Fourth Chorus first appeared in Silksong's reveal trailer from 2019, and it always stood out for its massive size compared to the bosses that appeared in Hollow Knight. And even within Silksong's roster, the Fourth Chorus still manages to stand out for its spectacle. Mechanically, the fight is well telegraphed, and while it's one of the easier fights in the game, it's still engaging. Lore-wise, this is Hornet's first hint at what awaits her in the Citadel, and the little storytelling bit with the pin in their neck is cute as well. Second Sentinel snags number 15, and is the first boss to have over 20% of respondents give the max score of 5 out of 5. Since starting work on this video, I've come to realize that Second Sentinel is one of the best fights in the game. Their attacks come out at a constant pace, and their moves flow into one another smoothly. Second Sentinel uses moves seen from other bosses such as Lace, Pinstress, and Seth. So it feels a bit like Team Cherry just threw a bunch of already designed attacks together to create this fight, and it somehow works perfectly. The small room also keeps the pressure on. I think it was a good idea to move this fight from the room we originally saw it in the 2019 reveal trailer. Since I'm saying Second Sentinel is a great fight, I think I should address one aspect of their fight that a lot of Silksong boss fights share that has drawn criticism. Basically, Second Sentinel can dash forward into the player suddenly, with practically no time to react. This type of movement is shared by bosses like Carmelita and Crust King Khan. Since these games have contact damage, moves like this are essentially untelegraphed attacks. So how is that fair? Since Hornet's primary weapon is a needle that she swings at close range, she usually needs to be near the opponent to damage them. In theory, you can avoid getting hit by waiting until the boss commits to an attack, punishing them in designated safe windows, and then backing off while in neutral so the boss can't just walk into you. In these types of fights, the player has to take on a more reactive role and wait for the boss to commit to an action first. And since the boss gets to control the tempo of the fight, encounters with bosses like Second Sentinel become more of a dance of attacks and counterattacks from both sides in equal measure. And depending on how aggressively you like to play these fights, that can feel either fun or frustrating. Personally, I think these fights feel exhilarating. They're certainly not flawless, but I think Team Cherry has been able to wrought a lot of good fights through this somewhat punishing design choice. But what do I know? I'm not a game designer. Well, I guess technically I am, but my game doesn't have contact damage, so I don't even have to worry about this kind of stuff. Hornet's rival, Lace, finally makes her appearance at number 14. Lace is the first boss on this list to have less than 1% of respondents rate her 1 out of 5, and less than 5% to rate her 2 out of 5. I honestly don't have much to say about Lace 1. I first fought her back in 2019 at PAX Australia. She took me quite a few tries back then, but I beat her first try on my first playthrough when Silksong launched. She's an all-around solid fight and a great parallel to Hornet 1 from Hollow Knight, but you can make easy work of her as an early game boss. Lace 1 is just a taste of what's to come. Waltzing into number 13 on the list is Clover Dancers. Their high scores are somewhat offset by their middling consensus ranking of 21st place, implying their position on this list isn't quite as settled as the bosses around them. The Clover Dancers are in a weird spot. It seems they're generally considered a good boss fight, but out of all the repeat bosses across both Hollow Knight and Silksong, the Clover Dancers is one of the few fights to feel like a downgrade to its predecessor. It works alright on paper, with one of the dancers being replaced with an invulnerable specter, but it lacks the narrative punch found in the Cogwork Dancers fight. The fight has less phases and just feels less fleshed out than their Act 2 counterpart. And I personally think the runback to Clover Dancers is the worst runback in the entire game. Waiting for the Elegy of the Deep transition sucks for all the old hard bosses. but Clover Dancers also has a whole area you have to run through after that. It feels like a bigger waste of time than the Last Judge and Grohl runbacks, which actually provide a challenge to the player instead of just being boring. At number 12, it's Grandmother Silk, the final boss of Silksong's base game, and the first boss on this list to score an average above 4.0. Mechanically, Grandmother Silk is a fun fight. She encourages using Clawline, which will always be a big plus in my book. Positioning Hornet in ways where she can both avoid Grandmother Silk's needles, while also sneaking in extra hits, is satisfying and plays well to Hornet's toolkit. My main criticism with this fight is that while the fight itself is good, and Grandmother Silk's lore in general is good, her lore doesn't fit this fight for one specific reason. She's just too easy. Grandmother Silk is a higher being, a pale being even, and yet, she's an easier fight than both Lace 2 and the High Hall's Gauntlet, both of which are mandatory to reach her. This makes Grandmother Silk feel like a total pushover. Her fight has two phases, and the second phase starts with her dropping rocks on you. Rocks. Seriously, who does she think she is? Skull Tyrant? How dare you stand where he stood? Why is this godlike being attacking us with rocks? Grandmother Silk also doesn't fare well when we compare her to the final bosses of Hollow Knight, the Hollow Knight and the Radiance. The Hollow Knight and Grandmother Silk have quite a few parallels. The Hollow Knight fight has also been criticized for being too easy, and both Hollow Knight and Silksong's base endings can feel very anticlimactic. But I think the Hollow Knight takes the edge here, with the narrative moments planted into the fight itself. The sudden, tragic turn the fight takes when the Hollow Knight begins impaling itself does a lot to pull you into the story of the character. Grandmother Silk does get a great scene with Lace in the Snared Silk ending, but the base fight feels a bit lacking to me. Also, Hornet challenging this Silk Ball just doesn't have the aura of the Knight challenging the Sun, and it's so rare for the Knight to outdo Hornet in that coolness factor, so I couldn't help but take notice of that. All that said, it's still a fun fight, and I do like it. The problem is I'm comparing it to Hollow Knight and the Radiance fights from Hollow Knight, and I don't think Grandmother Silk quite lives up to those encounters. It makes sense for her to be ranked this high, but I personally just didn't vibe with it as much as I did the other fights lower on this list. Making his explosive debut at number 11 is the Red Tornado himself, TROBBBBIOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOO hailed TROBBBBIOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOO Over 80% of respondents gave TROBBBBIOOOOOOOO a score of 4 or higher. Silksong's story feels much more urgent and present than Hollow Knight's, which makes it all the more bizarre that this random theater kid that likes throwing explosives around like they're cans of soup is a mandatory boss fight. TROBBBBIOOOOOO has pretty much nothing to do with Silksong's main story, and he probably has even less to do with any of Silksong's themes. His whole existence is just silly. But TROBBBBIOOOOO leans into that silliness. The way he randomly strikes poses during the battle and moves around through trap doors sells the player on just what this guy is all about. And we can't forget about his death sequence. If I ever die, I hope I'm at least half as entertaining as this guy. Oh, and the fight itself is pretty good too. It's a bit chaotic, but completely manageable as long as you pay attention to your positioning. TROBBBBIOOOOO does so many things well. It almost feels criminal for him to be this low on this list, but that's only because the last 10 bosses we're going to talk about are so good, there just wasn't enough room left for poor little TROBBBBIOOOOO. At least, not in his current form. Something tells me that we haven't seen the last of Farloom's final thespian. Kicking off the top 10 is Shrine Guardian Seth. From here on out, every single boss has a mode of 5, meaning they got more 5 votes than any other number. Before players can challenge Nihilith and claim her heart for the red memory, they must defeat Shrine Guardian Seth. Seth is a unique boss fight in Silksong, being created by Seth Goldman, a young Hollow Knight fan who passed away in 2020. Seth got the opportunity to meet Team Cherry, and they let him design a boss for Silksong. Shrine Guardian Seth is a result of that meeting, and he stands as a loving tribute to a young Hollow Knight fan whose memory will live on through this boss. Seth himself is unrelentingly aggressive, moving around quickly and forcing the player into a more defensive playstyle, similar to what we saw with Second Sentinel. The change of pace, mixed with the solemn music, sets the mood for an atmospheric duel between two bugs at the end of the world. Seth himself appears after the fight, seemingly unaware of his time serving Nihilith, which naturally leads players to ask a lot of questions. Where is this guy from? How did he become friends with a plant? What happened to the other Shrine Guardian Seth talks about? Is there a reason his name is so similar to Nihilith's? Was there another Shrine Guardian named Beth? As much as I'd love a full breakdown of who exactly Seth is, the mystery surrounding him is part of what makes him such a cool character. I'm glad Team Cherry added Seth to the game, and he's probably one of my favorite fights in the entire franchise. He just hits in a way no other boss fight can. The Last Judge explodes into number 9 on the list, with 85% of respondents scoring them 4 or higher. Before players can gain entrance to the Citadel, they have to fight one of 2 separate bosses. Last Judge is the boss most players will find first on their playthrough, with their path being a little easier to find than Phantom's, and they are no pushover. The Last Judge's moves come out quickly, leaving practically no downtime between attacks. The Last Judge is probably best known for their somewhat tricky runback, which became the subject of much debate in the early days of Silksong's release. I struggled quite a bit with this runback because I didn't realize you could just run past this annoying little fly, but being forced to do this runback certainly made Last Judge feel all the more imposing. Great boss with great theming and great attacks. They do have the tendency to jump around the room like a maniac, but if I could jump that high, I would probably be doing that too. The 8th spot on this list has been claimed by none other than Tormented TROBBBBIOOOOOOOOO. He's the first boss to get a median score of 5, meaning over half of all respondents gave Tormented TROBBBBIOOOOOO a score of 5. But he ranked a bit low on the consensus ranking, all the way down at number 26. But that should be no surprise given how his fight actually works. His attacks are more aggressive, more overwhelming, more flamboyant. This fight works so well as a follow-up to the first TROBBBBIOOOOOO fight in Act 2. The way his antennae go from being shaped like a heart to drooping down over his face is an inspired design choice. That said, this boss might be the most egregious about RNG. His fireworks and smoke bomb attacks can overlap with his tornado attack to create situations where taking damage feels unavoidable. You can hit the smoke bombs away, but you don't have full control over where they go. But despite Tormented TROBBBBIOOOOO having potentially the most bullshit design in the entire game, everything else about this boss is so good that he still manages to land high on this list. This is the true power of TROBBBBIOOOOO. Number 7 on this list belongs to Phantom, Lace's silk-fading sibling. With Phantom, we've truly hit the undisputed champions of Silksong's bosses. These 7 bosses all land at the top of the consensus ranking, and were overwhelmingly scored 5 out of 5 by respondents. Phantom serves as an alternate entrance to the Citadel, making the Last Judge fight optional. Mechanically, Phantom feels similar to the Hornet fight from Hollow Knight. They like to jump in the air, throw their pin, and then dive downwards towards it. One big difference, however, is Phantom's Grand Slam move that covers almost half the screen. The fight also ends with this wild moment where Hornet counters Phantom's attack, dealing a killing blow that causes them to spew silk like they're in a Kurosawa film. Team Cherry went with this whole Phantom of the Opera theme, giving Phantom a massive organ that actually affects the flow of steam in the Citadel. Defeating them not only turns off the steam in parts of the world, but it also removes the mist from the map entirely. And then there's Phantom's lore. Being the discarded child of Grandmother Silk, forced to toil underneath the Citadel and operate the exhaust organ. Not only is Phantom fighting against the deterioration of their own body, but they also get treated as undesirable for reasons outside of their own control. So not only is Hornet going after the gays, she's also got it out for the handicapped too. What is this girl's problem? Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the issue of Phantom's gender. In my first lore video on Silksong, I exclusively referred to Phantom as female, but I should have made it clear that Phantom's gender is more open-ended than that. I took this thread memory line of, "Why us, sister?" as Lace calling Phantom her sister, but the game doesn't make it explicit who is talking here. Hornet uses the gender-neutral pronoun there for Phantom in the Hunter's Journal, leading some to speculate that Phantom is non-binary. Now, Silksong is a bit weird, in that there are a few instances where Hornet uses different pronouns for characters than the characters themselves use. There's even one instance with Sister Splinter where the pronouns Hornet uses changes between sentences. But even if that is the case, in instances where it isn't made 100% clear elsewhere, I think it makes sense to default to whatever Hornet says in the Hunter's journal. Since words like they and their are gender neutral, that leaves room open for a non-binary interpretation of Phantom's character. And of course, this wouldn't be a first for the Hollow Knight franchise, which already featured multiple non-binary characters like the Hollow Knight. When asked directly if they support players reading the Knight as non-binary, Ari Gibson said the following: "Absolutely, we support this, and it's fantastic that players could feel empowered in such a way." There's a lot that could be said about Silksong and gender, and how the community interacts with this aspect of the lore. But my main goal right now is to make it clear that Phantom's gender is more open to discussion than my first Silksong lore video implied. My goal with these videos is to invite lore discussion, not close it off. Moving forward, I'll try my best to handle these aspects of the lore more thoughtfully and gracefully. Lace 2 is fucking bussin'. Her spot at number 6 should be no surprise to anyone who finished this game. We've been seeing this fight in Silksong's marketing since 2019, and it felt so surreal to finally watch the cutscene of Hornet ascending the lift to face off against Lace at the top of Farloom. The setting for this fight is iconic: a field of flowers surrounded by a maze of industrial pipes, spewing steam and air and sending petals into flight. And the fight itself is a strong evolution on Lace's moveset from Act 1. Her attacks are faster, more threatening, but she still leaves plenty of opportunities for Hornet to sneak in additional hits in the middle of her moves. This is also when we finally learn the truth about Lace's nature, that she's a being made of silk, desperate for her mother's approval, and jealous of Hornet for being the object of Grandmother Silk's desire. Lace 2 is the emotional core of Silksong, introducing us to the depth of Hornet's rival, as well as setting the stage for Act 3, both thematically and literally. Weaving her way into the 5th spot on this list is Widow, the Mad Weaver responsible for haunting the bugs of Bellheart. This feral beast is when we start to get a strong idea of what's truly going on in the land of Farloom, as Widow hopes to claim Hornet as an offering for Grandmother Silk. I'd consider Widow the first truly challenging fight in the game. She is constantly throwing projectiles at Hornet, and it can be easy to feel overwhelmed by the barrage of bells. But once you feel comfortable, the whole fight clicks and it becomes a mad dash to smack Widow around as she uses her silk to set up her next attack. Widow rewards the player with the Needle-In, which serves as a central item in Hornet's toolkit, both in terms of the game's emphasis on silk and song, and in terms of reaching the Citadel. Widow is the Silksong fight of Act 1, and Team Cherry absolutely knocked it out of the park. Locking into number 4 on this list are the Cogwork Dancers. This is the 3rd mandatory boss in a row, and the last mandatory boss on this list to achieve Silksong's base ending. Given that 7 out of Silksong's 9 mandatory-ish bosses ranked in the top 12, it's clear that Team Cherry put a lot of care and attention into these fights. And it's not like the other 2 fights are even that bad. They're just on the easy side. The Cogwork Dancers were first revealed during Summer Games Fest 2025, shortly before Silksong was released. And as soon as we saw this fight, we all knew it was going to be an all-timer. The immediate comparison you can draw with this fight is the Mantis Lords, themselves a standout boss from the original Hollow Knight. Much like that fight, the Cogwork Dancers fight starts off slowly, introducing you to the attacks and preparing you for what's to come. As the fight progresses, the attacks increase in speed, and eventually the dancers desync as attacks come out one after another with hardly a chance to stop and catch your breath. The fight finally crescendos with the destruction of one of the dancers. It's at this point in the Mantis Lord fight where the tension gets diffused, and the player has to clean up the remaining Lord. Cogwork Dancers turns this slightly awkward moment found in Mantis Lords on its head, instead using this part of the fight as a dramatic and tragic moment where one dancer is forced to continue without their partner. It's one of the highlights of the entire game, and a prime example of great Team Cherry boss design. While not at the top of the list, I think one could argue that Cogwork Dancer is a perfect fight. I seriously can't think of a single thing I would change. Well, that's not true. The next obvious step is to replicate Sisters of Battle and turn the Cogwork Dancers into a polycule. Lost Lace rises up from the abyss to claim number 3 on the list. Lace is such a good boss fight, Cheem Cherry decided to use her thrice. But out of the 3, Lost Lace shakes things up the most. The arena is much wider. Lace's attacks have been given void alterations, and she even has brand new void-focused attacks. She can also teleport all over the place, and will do so quite often. I said of Grandmother Silk that she lacks some of what made the Hollow Knight and the Radiance stand out, and I'm happy to report that Lost Lace does not fall into this trapping. I'd say she exhibits a lot of the beloved boss design elements found in the Radiance fight. That is to say, her attacks can overlap in bullshit ways, and it can sometimes be difficult to know what attack she's even performing. The wider arena also introduces the issue I discussed earlier with bosses like Chakra and Shrine Guardian Seth. Yeah, Lost Lace is a hard fight, and she can feel a bit unfair at times, but once you get the feel for what she's doing, the fight is fun. Dodging all the massive Void Tendril attacks and smacking the all-consuming Void off Lace's stupid face feels rewarding. And of course, there's the lore surrounding this fight. Maybe the Void stuff in Act 3 comes out of nowhere, but I think the game uses it to explore Lace's relationship with her mother in a compelling way. Grandmother Silk's final sacrifice to help Hornet, i.e. the lady who killed her, rescue her daughter, is a great finale to Silksong's story. As a true final boss, I think Lost Lace is pretty good. I don't even care that this is the 3rd Lace fight. Give me a 4th one where she's mucked or something. Let me fight her in space. Put Tony Hawk in there somewhere. Taking center stage as the runner-up champion of Farloom's boss roster, Scar Singer Carmelita claims the number 2 spot on the list. It's a little insane how much higher on this list Scar Singer Carmelita is than any other Old Heart. But her ranking is well deserved because this fight is amazing. The presentation here goes a long way to selling just how grand a figure Carmelita was to the Scar. Her singing in this massive hall as legions of ants watch on in awe literally sets the stage for this fight. And the way her singing continues throughout the fight, save for when she's staggered, adds to the atmosphere as well. Carmelita is an aggressive fight, especially during her 3rd and final phase. Some of the best fights in these games feel like a dance, and Scar Singer Carmelita is no exception. She's easily the best of the Old Heart bosses, and absolutely worthy of her placement on this list. And beating out 45 other bosses to take the crown as the best fight in the entire base game of Silksong is none other than First Sinner. Out of all the entries on this list, First Sinner has the highest consensus ranking. The simple truth is, everyone knows this fight is the pinnacle of Silksong bosses. Fighting a fully powered Weaver after seeing them hinted and teased at for so long was truly cathartic, and her moveset lives up to the Weaver's supposed strength. The First Sinner is fast and ferocious, forcing Hornet to position well and react quickly to her onslaught of attacks. But where the fight truly shines is once First Sinner starts spamming her needle weaving attack. It's at this point where you can just let loose and start claw lining her over and over. Split-second reactions and positionings between claw lines become your primary focus as these two Weavers find themselves caught in a silken dance of death. This is peak Silksong. But the fight is just half of it. First Sinner's lore is also top-notch. Despite Hornet's proclivity to explain the history of Farloom to anyone that will listen, First Sinner's lore still manages to stay shrouded in mystery. She's found caged up in the slab, but it's not exactly clear who is responsible for her imprisoning and why she was even locked up in the first place. But despite there being no single straightforward answer, the game gives us just enough details to construct our own narratives about what happened. That's when the lore of these games is at its best. First Sinner's lore also plays into the fight as well. Remember how I said Plasmified Zango is one of 2 bosses that could heal themselves? First Sinner is the other one, capable of using the same binding ability that Hornet uses. It's an easy attack to punish, but its inclusion makes the boss feel much more unique. First Sinner plays into everything that makes Silksong a great game, from the fast-paced gameplay to the music and sound, and of course the lore surrounding the fight. First Sinner delivers on all fronts, making her an easy pick for Silksong's greatest boss. And that's all of Silksong's bosses rated by the community. And here's my personal rankings as of right now. Yeah, I'm putting Bell Eater in top tier. This is just a glimpse into my dark and twisted mind. The only bosses I think are truly bad are Plasmified Zango and Summon Savior, and even they have at least somewhat interesting lore. But even bosses like Broodmother and Savage Beastfly are, fine. They might not play to the strengths of what makes Silksong fights fun, but they still provide an engaging challenge to overcome. Of course, I'm releasing this video before any of Silksong's content packs are released, and as of right now, we aren't sure if Team Cherry is going to give Silksong a God Home type boss rush mode. Lore-wise, you could probably put a boss rush inside a thread memory, but gameplay-wise, I'm not sure how Team Cherry would handle all the minion waves they added to fights like Broodmother and Crawfather. I'll be honest, forcing us to fight enemy spawns like this might make a potential Pantheon of Farloom painfully annoying to play through. There have been a lot of complaints about the tedium found in the Pantheon of Hallownest, and I wonder how Team Cherry might change things this time around, given that feedback. But if we do get an update like Godhome, there's a chance for some of these bosses to get a nice glow up in some way. We could get a more developed Clover Dancers, a more difficult Crust King Khan, or, God willing, a more caked up Lugoli. Above all, I hope we get a new Grandmother Silk fight akin to Pure Vessel or Absolute Radiance from Hollow Knight. She's just too easy right now. And besides, you need to look no further than this very ranking to realize that Silksong fans love women who can kick their asses.